5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
Welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. We got a full complement today, boys.
Hey, everybody.
Well, hi there.
It is so nice to have the full team back together again.
Together again. Da 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 da. I'm sorry, that was a Muppet moment.
What? Oh, the sad thing is I knew what you're talking about.
We need to do a Muppets podcast. I'm kidding.
What do you mean by Muppets podcast? Like, what would we do?
We talk about the Muppets.
Okay.
Bum, 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 bum.
We're going to role-play Muppets.
We're going to roleplay the Muppets RPG. All right, moving right along. Moving right along. Dong, dong. I'm gonna be Dr. Teeth. Well, all right.
So, for the record, Dan said right before the podcast started, I'm too tired, guys. I don't know if I can make it. And here he is, like, flaming out on us.
Probably just had a monster.
Yeah, exactly.
You got about 6 minutes left, and I'm gonna hit mute. You're gonna hear snoring.
Oh, good times. All right, well, today we are going to talk about gaming terrain. Not necessarily for war games, because that's a whole different kit and caboodle, but we're talking about gaming terrain for RPGs or board games. What's good about it? What's bad about it? Do you need it? What does it do for you? All those questions and more will be answered later in the show, but first, how was your Geek Week? Dan, let's kick it off with you, buddy.
All right. Well, I've reported on this many times. I really did finish my World of Smog, my first two big sets. I painted about half of my minis for World of Smog, Rise of Moloch. I'm really pleased with how they came out. I think they came out. First of all, they were a lot more difficult than my Journeys in Middle-earth.
Yes.
Mainly because each one of these characters has a detailed character card with very subtle changes in coloring and character design. I was trying to be as faithful as I could without making too big of a mess. I learned I can't do checkerboard patterns on somebody. I'm not going to even attempt it.
That's hard with contrast. That's really hard with contrast.
Well, even just normal whatever. I can't do straight lines like that. So I'm like, you know what? It was a white and purple checkers. He'll be purple. Who cares?
Nice. I like
Move
it.
along.
Fair.
But the thing that I did discover in this, right before I was finishing and before I sealed them, I got a bunch of Army Painter paints in a, because every time now when I order from Miniature Market to get to my threshold for free printing, I'm just throwing in extra paints. And
we've created a monster, Jason.
Oh man,
Yes.
$4 for Fairy Dust, which is a white metallic.
Oh,
And
okay.
it took minis who on the character art were emanating light because they had magic, or they were possessed by magic, or they were floating, or spectral. And you paint them white and they look white, and then you put fairy dust on them, and now they're picking up the light in the room.
Oh, cool.
And so I used it for magic, I used it for some characters, and I'm really proud of how these came out. They look so much better than my last batch, which I was very proud of. In fact, my wife was looking at my photos of the last batch I did and went, "You did that?" And she's like,
Nice.
"You did that?" Yeah, I did that. But the Rise of Moloch stuff has come out really great, and the Army Painter and the contrast paints were very helpful. And the metallics from Army Painter are a really good deal. You can do some really fun stuff at relatively low cost. So,
All right, well, I'm going to say the necessary thing. Pick or it didn't happen. You need to throw some of those pics up on Facebook for us.
what happened? What didn't happen?
You
Pics.
look, pics or it didn't happen, bro.
Pics or
What
it
I'm
didn't happen.
doing is I'm going to photograph each mini next to the character card.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
good or
that's a
for-
good idea. That's a
for-
great
yeah.
idea.
It's probably not going to be that great because people will say, "Oh, well,
We should
can
post
see-
that on the website. The Dan's journey to a fully painted.
That's right. Or we
Wow.
got an
World of Smog.
Instagram account. We can definitely throw it on the IG.
I literally have like 3. It's 100 minis, and they all have a character card. Not some of them are. There's 8 of one or 6 of one, but still, I mean, the character card wise, I'm up to at least 50.
We can post it on the IG. We can link it from our website. We can make a still shot slideshow and post it on YouTube. How can
There
we
you
reuse
go.
all of this?
There you go. We
Yeah,
got
absolutely.
content.
And in the background of the slideshow on YouTube will be Sarah McLachlan's In the Arms of an Angel.
In the
Yes.
arms of the- There'll be a little tear coming down the
Exactly.
eye. Of,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
turned out really.
Everyone, Dan spent some money.
I spent some money. I
need
don't
some-
think it wasn't as expensive as I thought it would be when I got into it. So you can control your costs on paper.
You can. Yeah.
Wait,
But I
was
get
it-
stubborn. Like, I start trying to use old paint pots that I should be throwing away. I'm like, I'm not buying another one of these.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, I did transfer all of my paint pots into iDrip bottles, and I've got Army Painter ball bearings in there because their video convinced me. They're like,
yeah.
if you use our ball bearings, we put these in salt water, and we put some generic ones in salt water, and look, the generic ones are turning this bottle orange. I'm like, okay, I'll buy name brand ball bearings. So, but by the way, I only needed about 10 of these bottles, and they come in packs of 30.
Oh.
And you know how when you're jumping in and out of Amazon too fast, you accidentally double buy something?
Oh, no.
So now I am swimming in eyedropper bottles. So if you guys need them, if folks in our gaming group are listening and want some 15 milliliter eyedropper bottles, I have a whole pack of 30 I haven't even opened yet. So anyway, they're good.
Right on.
I also got the X-Wing Razor Crest, which is what the Mandalorian, Din Djarin flies. I've not done any list building around it, but I'm excited to fly Scum again because it's a really cool piece. It does some new things that its predecessors don't do the same way. So I'm excited to fly the Razor Crest in X-Wing.
There's one thing that I need to ask you about that you didn't bring up in your Geek Week this week.
I purposely didn't bring it up.
I want to know about it.
This is a well. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to alienate our wonderful listeners. We have great listeners. Keep coming back for content, and I got teeth firmly planted in my tongue.
In 2 weeks, I'm gonna need an update.
There's gonna be look. As of tonight, all I have is salty Dan on the subject. I'm just very salty. Long story short, I bought a Games Workshop product. It was my first Games Workshop product. And very long story, very short, I'm struggling. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Dan is struggling. Beginning, middle, and 3 words. Dan is struggling.
We should just have a build night.
We do need one. Which kind of leads me into my Geek Week, which I'm sorry, Dan, I'm going to take over a little bit.
Take it away.
I need a build night because I just bought 4 sets of like Warcry style terrain
Oh, baby.
to build and
Is this
to
for
put
the
on
tourney?
tables. Yeah.
Oh, I thought GW was going to sponsor us.
They're gonna provide some of it, but
okay.
in talking with the organizer, the overall organizer James, he's like, yeah, you should bring like if you've got 16 tables, you should bring 8 tables of your own. And I had enough for 5 of my own that I could put out, but I bought a bunch, so I've got enough for 8 now. But
Yeah, let's
that
do
doesn't
it,
mean-
dude. We'll
I
get our
gotta build a bunch.
airbrushes. We'll get our airbrushes. We'll build. I guess
Yeah.
we'll build first, then we'll airbrush.
Yeah, so we definitely need a build night because I've got so much terrain to build, and I think you got models to build too, don't you, Jason?
I have an entire Kill Team box to build.
Yes, absolutely.
From Christmas.
That counts.
Exactly.
That counts. That
Yes.
So I got another box of that Sigmarite Mausoleum, one which is like the
I love
the
that
crypts. Oh, I know. So I got another box of that. I got another box that's similar to the original Warcry box. It's called the Azurite Ruins. And then I got 2 boxes of 3 more trees each. So I'm going to build some more of the trees. And and then I got 1 more box coming, which is called the Blasted Hallow Heartlands, and it looks like some cool terrain. It's like ruiny terrain stuff. So I'm going to have like 8 tables of very different tables, which I think is going to be kind of cool. for the tournament.
Yeah, it's
So,
going to be fun.
Yeah. And speaking of tournament, I'm just going to make a quick plug. If you are into Warcry and you're in the Northern Virginia area, we are having a Warcry tournament event Saturday, June 4th at 1 p.m. at Huzzah Hobbies up in Leesburg. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a prep for the Nova Open tournament. So, like, if you don't know the game very well or you want to come out and just play it and see what it's like, this is going to be a really fun event. There are going to be prizes included. And, which is going to be probably some gift cards to the store. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Hey,
So
did
that's a
Huzzah, is Huzzah hosting this for free?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so the way that it works is that basically you're like, hey, we want to host it. As long as there's nobody else there, they're like, no problem. How many tables you need? What do you need? Da, 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 da. And I'm going to be collecting the money that goes into the prize money and stuff like that. And then because I am going to be getting store credit with it for the prize money that you could spend there, like that's kind of their payment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, got it.
So
Kind of.
but they're really helpful and very, very friendly.
Well, that's not their first rodeo, right? They've been doing this for a long time.
Oh yeah. But they're. Some game stores sometimes are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude.
Oh, well, then I won't be able to bring Magic players in.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So I think they're very happy to have Warcry come. I know that they've tried to do this like pre-pandemic, and it kind of fizzled out. So I think they were happy to hear that Warcry is coming back there. So pretty good. Sorry, that was a little plug. My last Geek Week thing is I've been watching Moon Knight. Season finale is on Wednesday, May 4th, which is coming out. I'm going to be honest with you, Dan. I'm not loving it that much.
It got better, in my opinion. It got better. No spoilers.
Yeah. I mean, it was good. The fourth episode was good.
The penultimate episode.
Yeah. Was that fourth or fifth episode?
The fourth or fifth. It's a 6-episode arc. The one that's before the last one. And I think the fourth and the fifth are kind of companion episodes. They kind of go together.
Yeah.
It's much more psychological than superhero. It's much more head games than it is, let's say, Winter Soldier and Falcon. So if you want Falcon Winter Soldier, it's there for you. It's great. This one is a little more, what's going through this guy's head. Why is he motivated to do what he's doing? And what do Egyptian gods have to do with all this?
Those are all fair questions. I'm just going to say that I think that, what's his name? Poe Dameron.
Oscar
what's
Isaac.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac, thank you.
Took me a while to get past Poe, yeah.
Yeah, he's doing a really great job. Like, he's a phenomenal actor, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that he's doing a great job. I don't know if I'm loving the Marvel series in general. Like all the series in general. Anyway.
And that one is
that's a story for another day. Maybe that's a different podcast.
It's really
Marvel
important
series.
to not treat that one as an MCU chapter. Yes, it's part of the MCU, but he is not on contract to shoot 1 minute after this thing aired, after this 6th episode aired.
I think a lot of people are seeing what the tie-in is, and if there's no tie-in, that's interesting.
I don't think there's going to be any tie-in at all.
Yeah. Okay.
So, anyway,
I
liked it. Give it
just
a go.
sorry. One more little plug. I saw the Nicolas Cage movie, The Unbearable Weight of, or
in the theaters.
Yes. Yeah. Let me tell you, I thought it was hilarious and I loved it. It cracked me up. Like, Pedro Pascal was phenomenal in it. Who is, I mean, obviously we know the Mandalorian, right?
Yeah.
But he was phenomenal in it, and of course Nicolas Cage was like pure Nicolas Cage, so it was like amazing. So it was The Unbearable Weight of Incredible Talent, I think is the name of the movie. And, like, look, I'm giving it, 3 stars, but it was 3 very enjoyable stars as I watched it. So
It's still a Nick Cage movie. It's not.
It is,
it's
exactly.
not going to rocket to the moon.
And they just, totally, hang a lantern on, Nick Cage and Hollywood ridiculousness and stuff like that. And it just is very entertaining.
That's great.
So, yeah, sorry. I took a lot of Geek Week stuff, but I mean, there's some good stuff in there.
It's all good.
Yeah. Jason, how you doing, buddy?
All right, man. My turn. Let's see. So I have been traveling a lot lately, and when I got back, I was starting to geek out over Age of Sigmar. So I cleaned out my airbrush and
nice.
and primed up my Frost Lord on Stonehorn and got it pretty much almost all painted. I got the Stonehorn painted up completely, and I got the bases in the work. So I'm getting excited and getting back into the painting. It's been a long time since I've painted something significant. And this guy, I've been putting this guy off, and I find this happens a lot with the big guys. Like when I ran the FEC army, my second Terrorgeist, like I had that guy on the shelf unpainted for a long time. Like I would gear my lists around not only having one Terrorgeist because I didn't want to paint the other one.
Although I remember you playing with the unpainted Terrorgeist one time and completely forgetting that it was on the board.
Yep. That was the gray. I flew him into the middle of the table on top of a gray castle and then never moved him again for the entire game because I forgot he was there.
And that, kids, is why we paint our models.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I painted my Frost Lord and Stonehorn, and it's they are. The name implies, that they come from, like an icy north and such. But my ogre theme is different. You can obviously do whatever you want. So mine is, they're coming down from the grasslands and the hills. So mine has a nice kind of warm color texture to it, and so it's got like an orangish or dark orangish fur, and a nice stark bony texture to it versus kind of the ice and the white fur that. Many of them have. I'm happy with it so far. I don't know if I'm 100% sold, but I'm going to put it on the table, see what it looks like, see how I feel about it.
Cool.
Yeah. The other thing for my Geek Week is my daughter, and this is kind of a call out to my daughter. My daughter, and actually Dan's daughter, was in a local high school play, The Little Shop of Horrors, which I think was a great production. It was super entertaining, way more entertaining than Little Women. That's just me.
Suddenly Seymour.
Just me, yeah. So it's funny. I was driving home in the car with my other daughter, and I was like, I just want to say that was way more entertaining to watch than when they did Little Women. And my daughter goes, "Yeah, but," I said, "No buts. It was way more entertaining than watching Little Women." And she was like, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Different thing." Anyway, so this is interesting. I'm going to do a call to my daughter here. So there are 4 showings. Sunday was the final one, a matinee showing. Saturday night, when it's over, the pit director, which is the orchestra teacher for the school,
and she's the head of theater tech there, so she's doing light and sound as well.
Yeah, got sick and had to not make the next showing on Sunday. So but my daughter, who's a senior now, has very tightly intertwined with orchestra. Basically got a hold of her, and the orchestra lady, won't say her name, but she basically at 2:30 in the morning walked through the music with my daughter, and my daughter took the baton and conducted the pit and the orchestra for the entire production.
No way.
This is a senior in high school that conducted a pit, which is a mix of students and hired professionals. Yeah. In this production. So I was really proud of my daughter. She did really good.
That's
it was
awesome.
a great performance. The kids, all the kids that acted and put this thing together just did a great job. You get to this thing, it renews your faith in high school kids. You're like, okay, they can do something.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of things where I'm like, I'm losing the faith. I'm losing the faith. That's
yeah, my wife was in the audience for that show, and that was the second time she saw the show, and she really raved about how well your daughter did. She did a really great job considering all the circumstances.
Yeah,
she really hit it out of the park. So
yeah, your daughter too.
Well, thanks. Mine got her role reduced when she sprained her ankle right after the auditions. So
oh yeah, that's rough.
She was walking around in a big boot because she had this really deep, bad sprain that lasted for months. So, but she ended up dancing anyway. It was a good show. The great thing about that particular is they happened to have one kid in high school who was in theater, who could sing, and was a dead ringer for Rick Moranis.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's like if you aged Rick Moranis back in time to 10th, 11th grade, that's what this guy looks like.
I almost wonder if the theater person's like watched him like walk into the class and it's like, We're doing
There he
Little
is.
Shop
Yeah,
of Horrors.
now we
is.
know what show we're doing.
We have
yeah.
to. We have to. Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was my Geek Week. Good times.
Good times.
Awesome. Great stuff. Great stuff. I love our Geek Weeks. We have great Geek Weeks. I wish I had more time for Geek Week, to do Geek Week stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Cram it
So-
in when you can.
Yeah. I think our next segment's up.
Welcome to Tabletop and Beyond News.
That was a little subdued this time. I liked it.
I'm trying. I'm going to do every angle. When we do 360 episodes, I will have done every angle on that thing.
Okay.
We're not going to go too deep into the news, but for you Gen Con fans, the event catalog is up. Registration for Gen Con 22 Indianapolis is available right now, and registration is coming up on the 15th of May. So buckle up, people. Figure out what you want. If you're
Okay.
going to the if you're going to the big dance, it's time to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah. This is always a fun time of the year, right? Because everyone gets excited, they put into their queue, and then when that time hits, everyone just sits there and smashes that button on the website. And then you watch, and then you just watch the ticker load.
It's exciting for some of us.
And then it pops, and it's usually like, you didn't get in anything you wanted.
I remember going to my little sister became a doctor. She became a pharmacist. And I was outside with my little laptop, my little Chromebook, and my wireless hotspot trying to register for Gen Con. And as soon as I was like, I got to get registered before this thing starts because I'm not going to have any service. This was like 5 years ago. We didn't have 5G clearly. And I'm not gonna be able to get in anything if I go and sit down and watch my little sister graduate to become a doctor. My priority
Nice.
was Gen Con.
Yes, sir.
Not proud of it.
Yeah. I've
Kind of
definitely sat in many a church Sunday school trying to buy event tickets to Gen Con.
Your wife's leaning over, looking at you like, "What are you doing?"
What are you
You're
doing?
like, "I can't load my scriptures. Don't look at me."
I gotta use the restroom. I'll be right back.
It's like a bunch of guys out in the hall by the
Right.
water fountain in church. Like, all right, did you get in?
Like, dude, the church Wi-Fi doesn't let us get onto this site.
No.
Let's go. Where's the tower? Walk
Dan's got a
towards the
hotspot.
tower. Walk towards the tower. Yeah. All right. Our next
Good
piece
stuff.
of news I chose because it's directly related to our topic. Gale Force 9 announced they're taking over the distribution and manufacture of Tenfold Dungeon Room from Room 17 and are releasing the product to retail. It features no prep terrain made of nesting cardstock boxes that pack together in a tight, lightweight system that allows for setup of dungeons in moments. It can be stored away for easy transport. 4 versions will be available at launch: the castle, the temple, the town, and Dungeons and Sewers, available for $60 each.
Interesting.
So if you want quick fold terrain that fits in a backpack, which for Gen Con can be very, very
That could be
useful.
very
Who
cool,
walks to
yeah.
walk around with a whole lot of terrain?
Yeah.
When you're going from event to event, you can just fold it down, put it in your old backpack, and then when it's time to put it on the table, put it on the table.
Very good. I've got 2 little bits of news, if you don't
Are
mind.
they about Games Workshop?
One is.
Shocker!
One is. I'm actually going to start. Yeah, I'll start with that one. So, the big news out of the Warhammer Age of Sigmar world over the last week has been the releases, the leaks that have come out for the Slaves to Darkness book. That is Slaves to Darkness book and the Night Haunt book. The Night Haunt book is supposed to drop in spring, so we were kind of assuming late May, maybe early June, as that is still technically spring. But when the Slaves to Darkness book dropped, it kind of forced Games Workshop hand, and they showed a new updated timeline for their books, and Slaves to Darkness isn't supposed to drop until December of this year. And so they had like 6 books planned in between now and then. And so it was very clear that some of the playtesters that are out there have been dropping things that they shouldn't have. They've been violating, obviously, their NDAs. And the entire Night Haunt book is now up on like Imgur or Imgur. What is it, guys? Imgur?
Yeah, whatever.
It's up on Imgur, and like you can read the entire thing now. And the Slaves to Darkness book like had a bunch of stuff that was released, not the whole book, but it's clear that Games Workshop was not happy with these leaks, and that they were forced to pivot, right? Because they have their whole marketing setup planned and release dates and weeks and previews and all this stuff, and man, they had to pivot badly to try to respond to this and put a positive spin on it, like, hey, so you guys just saw the book.
That undermines sales of existing product lines.
Well,
they
so
lose money.
it
There's
can,
no way,
yeah,
there's no way a
100%.
leak helps you make money, because if somebody says, "Oh, that's the thing I'm going to buy," and they would have bought something that's available today.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like now, they can just like look at it on the internet and check that out. I will say that a lot of the pictures are done with potato cameras, and it's kind of hard to read all the text 100%. And I will say that from what I saw, especially for the Night Haunt book, it looks like a really good book coming out. So I think those players that were going to buy it are now really excited to buy it. So I think Games Workshop was lucky that Night Haunt book was what it was when it leaked. Because if it was a bad book, then they would have massively lost sales. People would have said, I'm not going to play this after all. So... yeah, kind of that was like big news last week, coming out with all the leaks. It was pretty crazy. The second is kind of an announcement for us. We were able to contact Free League Publishing, who is the publisher of the One Ring. They also do the Aliens RPG. They have the Tales from the Loop RPG that we have reported on our podcast. And they are also responsible for publishing the upcoming Kickstarter-backed Blade Runner RPG that's coming up. Well, I was able to contact them and said, hey, we just did an episode on Aliens. We love, the One Ring. We love all this other stuff. And we would love to do reviews for you. And they sent us almost their entire catalog to play test and give reviews on. So I'm very excited about that. Like, it just is showing that, if we're interested in giving you guys, our audience, our takes on some of these kind of indie RPGs out there, that these publishers are willing to let us test them out and give our thoughts on them. So I'm excited to try them out, and hopefully we'll get some interviews with some of the designers and writers and stuff like that on here as well.
Yeah, we literally have a year's worth of content now to work through, which is exciting.
Yep.
And access to the creators, which will be new for our podcast. So it'll be great.
I'm not sure how we're going to tackle this. So
We're
much
not going to have a
material.
meeting on the show. Take a breath, Jason.
Yeah.
Take a breath. Turn off your logistics brain and just go, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Let's get into the main topic.
Although Jason, just really quickly, I'm hold on one second. Jason, did you see that Vaesen RPG on there? It's the Scandinavian horror RPG.
I have seen that before, yes.
I said, Jason, this is yours. You should
Yes,
run a session for
I will
us.
take that one. Yeah, I'll also take the Morkborg, that one.
Oh, cool.
That'll
Want
be
to
a
take
fun
Alien
one.
too?
Yeah, you know what? We're not going to have a meeting on the show,
I know.
but
We're gonna give
I'm more excited though.
Folks,
We're excited.
we're just going to give them all to Jason, and now we know who's in charge. All right, moving right along.
it's going to be good. This is going to be cool.
I'm really excited about this because, especially since our gaming group is sort of shifting to doing this. We're going to be playing a Star Wars West Marches RPG campaign, and because of that, I think it's going to allow us a little bit of flexibility to kind of play test some of these RPGs in the cracks.
Yes.
Right. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
should be fun.
next Geek Week, instead of reporting out on my adventures with Games Workshop, we're going to talk about Star Wars West Marches.
That's not true, Dan. We're going to talk about your adventures with Games Workshop. It's going to happen.
You're going to have to pull me out of the depths of despair.
We can do it.
All right. Cool.
Sounds good. All right, let's get to our main topic. Thank you for the news, Dan. We appreciate it. Always
bet.
good stuff. So, as we were talking about our topic today, what we're thinking about, we had the idea of talking about gaming terrain. And obviously, when you're playing like a war game or a skirmish game, terrain is kind of a key. It's a must, so you're not just playing on a, totally flat, chessboard type of game. But that's not really what we're talking about. We're not getting into the war game stuff because obviously that has its kind of own brand of terrain and things
rules
that you need and rules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What we're talking about now is like using actual terrain stuff in your RPGs and or board games. And so, like for example, like a dungeon for a dwarven forge set of tiles, or Jason, what was that? The Hirsch molding stuff, right? That you could make as like little villages if you wanted to do for like RPGs and things like that, right? I think
Hertz Arts, the dental
Hertz
stone
Arts, yeah.
mold,
The dental
molding.
stone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's plenty of terrain stuff out there that you can do, and we'll talk about some of that. But we want to talk about some of the pros and cons of like having gaming terrain. So let's jump into the pros. Like if you're playing an RPG, Dan, why would you want to have gaming terrain on the board?
I use terrain all the time because I own a lot of minis and I like doing combats with minis, and I have generated my own terrain. I've bought terrain, and people have 3D printed terrain and given it to me as gifts. So I have a pretty great library. I also have a great library of two-dimensional maps that I've used to death. But I keep going back to the 3D terrain. I like miniatures as a storytelling device. It really helps folks reference scale, even if all the miniatures don't match like the right set, even if they're a little off-brand. People can get a feel for what's happening. It's harder in a hybrid game situation where you have a camera pointed down at the mini thing. In person, your eyes naturally have the 3D capability if you have two eyes, and you can get a feel for how the flow of the story is being depicted visually. And 3D is awesome, by the way. Miniatures moving up and down, enemies taking high ground and low ground, and anytime you can break away from the two-dimensional world, it's great. You're not doing pogs on a map. If you've got a 3D plastic mini, there's no reason why you shouldn't examine the possibility of investing in at least some kind of 3D terrain, whether it be paper or plastic or cardboard or plastic. Those are some of my reasons.
Yeah, I think that they're great. They're all great reasons. And my biggest thing is immersion, right? It's when you put it there on the table, it just helps you enter that little world that's in front of you and really feel like you're playing that. Like, what did we play? I played Escape the Dark Tower. No, not Escape the Dark Tower. That's Escape the Dark Sector. Return to the Dark Tower.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that, the terrain has a big impact on the gameplay. It actually participates in the gameplay. It's got like a little mechanism for dropping skulls out all over the game field and stuff. But it gives you a very strong sense of scale, like you were saying, Dan. That the size of that tower and then the minis that move around the tower, you could just picture yourself, really in this land looking up at this enormous tower farther up than the eye can see that's dominating the world around you. It just really helps with immersion, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And sometimes in a theater of the mind situation, which is great, theater of the mind can be very, very powerful because it can be very compelling for each individual person. But when you have a 3D map, you can get everybody on the same page.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
In a way, you otherwise maybe somebody's like, "Oh, I thought that we were actually doing this, but in fact we were doing that," and
right.
Some of those ambiguities get ironed out in the 3D space. I mean, I'm kind of addicted to it. I built a RPG table specifically to have a large mini well in it. So I'm
right.
I'm kind of like the wrong person to ask for the cons because I keep going back to it over and over and over again. Yeah. And one of the things that I like about it is the NPCs move logically and think logically, right? You can say, well, why do you keep attacking me? And I'm like, well, you're standing right out there, and you're dangerous. You're obviously in this battle. Nobody's going to try to spread damage to the guy hiding in the back. They're going after the guy who's walking point.
Yeah.
And that, in a theater of the mind situation where you're like, oh, well, so-and-so hasn't taken a hit, I should chew up some of their hit points. Maybe you would distribute it in a less, logical way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our last episode, Dan, was about fudging, right? And sometimes you're like, oh, okay, the bad guy's going to go after that guy now. Sometimes having that gaming terrain doesn't allow you to do that because it's like that bad guy can't see that guy, so it's not even an option. And I can tell you, in our current Rime of the Frost Maiden RPG campaign, right, we have it over Zoom. We have a basic map on the thing, but it's not a combat map in a sense, right? Yeah. Like, it doesn't get down to that level of detail. And so there have been several instances where I say, okay, this guy swings at you and hits you for this. And, the player's like, I was standing over there. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. I forgot about it. Well, he ran over to you and did it.
Exactly.
And so
for RPGs, I found that as soon as we got out of measuring distances, life got easier. I know people love playing on grids and hex maps, and those are great. I like them too. I mean, I have a grid on my whiteboard. If we wanted to do a battle, I could do a grid. But anyway, when I'm doing a miniature battle in the well, there are people go, well, how far can I move? I'm like, it's probably the distance from the palm of your hand, the bottom of the palm of your hand to the tip of your finger, give or take. I like, unless the rule set says you have to move X number of feet or X number of inches, and there's lots of game systems that do that. I like the ability to just kind of tell a story and have it be kind of messy. Oh, hey, what's long range? Well, it's a cubit. It's from the end of your elbow to the tip of your finger. I mean, that's long range.
Right.
And that has actually made games more fun because it gives players just a little bit of an edge because they're like, I think I could get a little bit closer. Other games that we played in the past that were a lot like D&D 4th edition, you had to count squares. The game existed on a grid. Your powers and your abilities were based on what you could do on that grid. And you would say, well, can you hit that guy? It's like, well, count the squares and you can hit him if you can hit him. This is 3D terrain gives you a little bit more wiggle room, And it's fun to put your eye down there and get line of sight and say, oh, I don't think you can get that guy because I see there's this wall in the way. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, look, we played the Klingon game at GuildCon last year, and you had little Klingon minis.
Yeah.
And you had a little bit of terrain that was on there. I think there were just little boxes and stuff like that, but
nothing too complex.
It represented a ship at one point, right? That we were kind of like checking out.
Yeah,
and,
based.
and we were kind of like walking around, and it was nice because we could get a little tactical, right? We could like climb up on the ship, or we could like use the corner for cover. And it's hard to do that in Theater of the Mind. It's hard to do that on a battle mat, right? Jason, we for years played with my battle mat when we did Shadow of the Demon Lord. And like it would work. It worked fine in terms of like being able to be flexible and like, okay, I'm going to draw a little like little grove of trees that you guys had a little random encounter in, right? And you guys would put your minis on there, and we'd use it to measure distances and stuff like that, and it worked fine. Like it definitely helped having distances and locations and people in certain spots, so you knew like who was fighting who. But like it definitely wasn't as immersive just having the battle mat, don't you think?
I agree. I think, and my number one thing that terrain brings to the table is immersion. I think in terms of being able to do the other things such as bound movement, provide line of sight, provide rules if it has rules, you can do all of that with 2D drawings on a thing. It's really the 3D adds the immersive feel to help bring your imagination in there. Now, I've talked about this before. I am a heavy theater of a mind in my RPGs. Like, I absolutely prefer theater of the mind over minis. I don't mind minis, and I enjoy minis, but when I DM, I always prefer theater of the mind. But I really enjoy a good terrain setting when I walk in and I see, the little, the little scaled buildings and farmlands and just everything. It helps to paint the picture, and I think what you said earlier, Dan, it helps unify everybody's view of the scenario that's in front of them. And that can be really helpful when you have a group maybe that's less experienced to help paint the picture for them.
Yeah. And sometimes for battle mats, I've never bought a vinyl mat that has a grid on it that I would whiteboard out stuff. And I know a lot of folks swear by those. What I did when I was doing 2-dimension is I would buy pre-printed maps. There's lots of them out there. My favorite all-time maps, bar none, is Maps of Mastery.
Yeah, I love those maps.
Maps of Mastery. I know the artist. He's a published artist in the game community, and he's really great. Mapsofmastery.com. Check it out. But what I would use those for the immersion pieces, I would say everything you see on this map, it's there. So if you see that somebody has left like a cup of coffee on a table, you can pick up that cup and throw it.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's that thing in your way, you got to jump it.
Right.
And that's kind of like getting into 3D terrain can be kind of steep, which is kind of like the cons, because we've talked about the pros, but the cons are there's a little bit more investment and it's harder, and what you have is, for lack of a better term, rigid. You can't store an infinite number of terrain. I can have a library of maps take up the same space as a big dictionary on my shelf, but that same space would only give me a very limited 3-dimensional storage capability. That's been my number one problem, is effective storage of all the different kinds of 3D terrain, which I have. I've got cardboard, I've got some amazing 3D printed. Jim, who's in our gaming group, printed for my birthday some gorgeous Star Wars terrain, and he painted it, and they're interchangeable and interlockable, and they're so great. I had another friend, get me some 3D printed some unpainted terrain, and I got to paint it and make it cool and all that stuff. So I love that stuff. I just, I'm running out of space for crap like that. And every time I want to do a new adventure, my players in an ongoing campaign have seen my stuff over and over again, right? So it better be configurable and unique. And the more times they see the same terrain over and over again, the less of an immersion they get from it. So that's kind of a con. And it's kind of clumsy, right? Getting set up. You're trying to keep the flow of the story going. You're like, okay, everybody stop. I'm going to set this thing up. If you pre-set it up and it's a big terrain piece and it's a big show piece, it's also a gigantic spoiler. And if your players decide not to find that terrain piece, and you kind of force it down their throats because it's like, I built this damn thing.
Sure, and you're going down that path.
You're kind of railroading just a little bit. So that's a con you got to think about. So if you're willing to if you're going to sandbox RPG, and your players never go to your awesome terrain that maybe you spent real money on and painted or 3D printed or whatever, sometimes you have to take a little slice of humble pie and say, okay, well, we didn't do that this time. Maybe next time it'll come into play.
So let me jump on that real quick. So, a con is, obviously the space it takes to store terrain and the cost to build it. I think we can expand this to say, and we've been doing it a little bit, is that terrain doesn't have to be 3D to provide immersion, right? For example, your battle mats, like you said, your example there, you see the coffee cup's there, right? It's giving players a visualization and a boundaries in the world that they have to operate in that makes the world a little more real, right? And so, having a battle mat, having a 2D picture or printout. In fact, I've seen, and everybody has probably seen these if they've gone to conventions. You can buy those like mouse pad neoprene terrains that look just quick terrains you can keep in your backpack, and you can throw on the table and say, look, there's a river, look, there's a mountain, look, there's a house, and it's easy to put down. It helps players visualize, and it doesn't have to be this giant, 3D thing that takes up space that's impossible to transport if you go to your buddy's house.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And, I think Dan, you touched on the rigidity of it, right? Like, you can't. The first time I did, I got my, well, I'm all over the place right now. All right, so I got my 3D printer for Christmas a few years ago, right? And I was thinking, oh, this is going to be amazing. I found Dragon Lock tiles, which is a modular terrain system, right? You just print out a bunch of tiles, which are floor tiles or wall tiles or door tiles or whatever. You just print out a bunch and you can lock them all together and configure them however you want, right? I printed out a ton of these, right? And I did a whole map on a basically dungeon terrain builder, right, where I could like map out, okay, like I was doing a sewer system. All right, I want to like have this junction, and there's a dead end here, and there's an encounter that's going to be up there, and like this is the way out and stuff like that. And I mapped out this whole thing, and it said you're going to need 700 tiles. Like, oh my gosh, I can print maybe like 10 in a day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gonna take me like 70 days.
And how many spools of?
And how many spools of stuff? And I'm like kind of doing I'm like, okay.
And what happens if the players say, you know what, we're not going to go in the sewer?
Exactly.
Sewer's a bad
exactly.
idea.
You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the way that I had set it up in the game is that was the session right after you guys had got put in prison, right? And so let's talk about railroading a little bit.
Yep, that was a fun episode.
You guys got put in prison and you were able to break out, you know, the next episode. But the way out was dun 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 through the sewer. Like that was the way
That's
out.
the only way out.
Right?
So
that was
you're
the
in the
only way out.
terrain now.
So you're in the terrain now, right? And I had it set up, and the problem was, again, I didn't want to spoil it. I didn't want to like lay out the whole thing so they could see where the exit was, because they would just beeline it for the exit, right?
Yeah.
So I tried to chunk it out to where it was like, okay, well, like obviously at this junction you can see to the next junction, but you can't see left or right because you only see straight right now, right?
Yeah, fog of war and real line of sight, if it's going to affect the game, is tougher to do on 3D. If it's a pre-pinned even any 2D map, you just get a lot of blank pieces of paper and start throwing it down, saying you can't see that.
And
A little harder to do in 3D space.
And so I chunked it out to where I was like, okay, well, like, you know, this is like section A, section B, section C, section D, you know, and I had them stored in a different location in the room. And, you know, people couldn't really, like, they could see that it was there, but it's hard to put, like, to get a map together when they're all kind of stacked up, right? And when they get to the junction, they look down and I'm like, okay, hold on. And then I'd go get it and I'd like try to hook it in, but it wasn't hooking in right. And I was like taking a minute to like, you know, some pieces kind of fell off, so I got to adjust them. And like by the end of the night, I think we had a good time with those sewer tiles. Jason, I don't know what your impression was of it.
It was fun.
It was cool. And I think it was immersive and it was a lot of fun. But I got done thinking like, this was a lot of work for, in my opinion, a little bit of return.
Yeah.
You know,
you have to watch the investment to return benefit.
Yeah, I remember thinking, well, I hope we go through some more sewers so we can use this again.
And we never did.
Nope.
Right? I mean, I still got a box. I still got a big old Amazon box that's full of sewer terrain tiles, right? And not all of them got painted because I didn't have enough time to get them painted before the thing, and they were okay, but like. Look, you know, it was a lot of work to get those 3D tiles put out. Was it cool? Yeah, like it was awesome. I feel like if you're gonna do like a big 3D terrain, like a Dwarven Forge, I think is a great example of this. Dwarven Forge is very expensive too.
Oh, sure.
Right, like it is not cheap to get their stuff, but it looks absolutely amazing. Like you can put LED lights in it. You can have like doors that open and close, and you can have something amazing. But gosh darn it, it had better be a giant dungeon that your players are going to be playing in for a while for you to feel like you're going to get bang for that buck. You know, like if I were to do a Dwarven Forge, it would be for the D&D game, the what is it, the Sunless Citadel. You know, where it
Yeah.
is a dungeon crawler with a very set map. You know what I mean?
Well,
And I'd be like,
D&D lends itself to the 3D terrain better than any other game because the dungeon crawl is part of the mythos.
right.
And so you're like, hey guys, you're playing D&D and you're in a dungeon. That's where one of the D's comes from.
Well, and I think too, like it's easy to say, like especially for that like Sunless Citadel game, like, hey, here's a map of the dungeon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the different rooms that the players don't know is going to happen or whatever, and so like it's fine because they're like, okay, well we got a map, and then that way you could have all of the 3D printed or Dwarven Forge or whatever like terrain that you have crafted out on the table ready to go. But look, to get through the Sunless Citadel, it's a couple of sessions. So are you gonna leave that thing set up for like a few weeks or something?
Everybody
you
comes
know?
back. And see, there's overdoing terrain, and then what I fall into is underdoing terrain sometimes, which is like, oh, okay, I got to put together a thing. Okay, I've got some moisturizer cream and a bottle of wet wipes, and I got a box, I got a spoon. The spoon's going to be a wall, you know, and I fall into that trap all the time. I'm like, oh, I have a giant D6. It's 3 inches by 3 inches by 3 inches. That'll be a computer. And it helps people understand three-dimensional space, but it doesn't immerse, and it's fast because I can just take it off my shelf and throw it on the table. But at the same time, unlike what you did by printing out all that awesome stuff, which was a high investment, and you were worried that it had maybe a medium level reward, I have low investment, low reward stuff that I do all the time.
Right.
But
that can definitely take away from the immersive experience when you're like, okay, well, how do we get on this stapler and fly it out of this place?
Yeah, this is the stapler. On the other side, I mean, I've gotten a lot of use out of Star Wars models. I mean, the FFG models. I've spent a lot of money on models, but I do put them down on maps, and I'm like, okay, well, here, this gigantic, 13-inch vehicle I'm putting down, which is like a capital ship in X-wing, but in terms of gameplay, it's like, okay, well, there's a cool looking Star Wars ship right here, and you got to fight your way through it and take it over, and now you're on the outside of it, running around, and the bad guys are up on top, and they're shooting down at you, and that's always great, and that's like you said, Dwarven Forge is expensive. Having a library of cool models is expensive. And what I would recommend to our listeners who want to get into it is just start small. If you want to do more three-dimensional stuff, don't go crazy. I mean, you don't print 700 tiles. Just start out and say, okay, well, I keep finding myself having to do a map for a tavern. So just start with a tavern, right?
Yeah.
Or start with the keep, or start with the inside of your ship. And the inside of your spaceship can be a place where lots of stuff happens. People can break in and they can hide in, and there's lots of adventures that can happen inside a ship. And mix it up with 2D maps too. Don't feel like it all has to be one way or the other, because the fact is GMs that have a big palette to draw from are usually pulling from things that were brand new 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, and the group you're playing with today has never seen it because you're not playing with the same group you were playing with 6 years ago.
Okay, so it's interesting. I think starting small, Dan, is the right move. I think the idea of getting a bunch of 2D maps, a library of those, getting them printed out like on an 11x7 sheet, even as a basic. Being able to put that down in front of your players, I think that's key.
You mean 11x17?
Yeah, is that what I said?
Yeah, or 11x7.
Yeah.
11x17 is clutch. You can do a lot with the 11x7.
Yeah, exactly. 11x17.
Two 8.5x11 pieces of paper next to each other. If you print two of those things out, I was printing a lot of my own stuff for a long, long time, and I always started with that size paper.
Yeah, 11x17 is a great size because it's big enough that everybody on the table can see it, but it's not too big where you're spending like a fortune at Kinko's or something like that. So go print a bunch of those types of maps out, and again, like if everybody finds themselves in a tavern, everybody finds themselves in a dungeon at some point, everybody finds themselves in a keep, and obviously if you're playing the D&D pre-printed books, there's a lot of maps in there and stuff that you could easily print out for your players. With that said, let's get to 3D, right? If you
One
wanna
other one other quick
Yeah,
thing
go
about
ahead.
getting started. There are maps for games that people don't play anymore that you'll find on sale, right?
Yeah.
And some of those are miniature games, right? For instance, Wizards of the Coast used to do a Star Wars miniatures game. So they published all these very large poster size maps. And I never played competitively that game, but I collected as many of those maps I could get my hands on. Lots of other games will, a game store will say, oh, nobody's playing this anymore, and they'll put stuff on sale.
Yeah.
Pick it up if it's cheap, even if you don't have a direct use for it. And that's a great way to build your library at $3 or $4 or $5, $6 a pop. Sorry, I just
Yeah.
wanted, that's
No,
that's what I did
great.
in order to deepen my bench of different options to have.
So I remember at Gen Con, we ended up playing one of my least favorite games I've ever played, and it was the Firefly like skirmish
Mini
game.
game, miniatures game.
Do you remember
yeah,
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about that is that they had 3D terrain that was relatively simple for that board, right? They were just basically like cardboard squares that looked like shipping containers.
Yeah.
And they had doors that you could go in and out, and like it matched up with the squares on the board and all that stuff. And it's almost like if you took the Clue board and made 3D cardboard walls,
Right.
like that's kind of what it looked like, right? And look, that provided some immersion because you could go in the building, you can hide around a corner, like that like those simple things. And there's lots of companies out there that sell this kind of card terrain or paper terrain that is relatively cheap to get into. And in fact, Dragon Lock is or the what is it? Is it Dragon Lock as a company? The company that makes the Dragon Lock terrain. I'm going to look it up real quick because I'm going to forget about it. They also have a whole papercraft. It's called Dragon Lock. They have a whole papercraft terrain model stuff, and you can buy them. I mean, there's like 3D fantasy paper, and basically it's plans on how to like make your own terrain out of cardstock, and you can print the terrain on the cardstock, and then it's like fold here, cut here, like glue here, and then all of a sudden you've got easy terrain, easy dungeons that are like simple to put together and pop up on your table from cardstock.
Yeah, it's Fat Dragon Games.
Dragon Games. Thank you so much.
And they have
Mildly
sci-fi
overweight.
and fantasy.
Sorry.
They have sci-fi.
He was giving information I was quipping. I'm sorry.
That's okay. They have so they have fantasy and sci-fi. I'll say their sci-fi stuff is a little toyish, in my opinion. Versus
some of the toy stuff can be good if you repaint it. It can be super awesome. Heroescape, if you find that at a like a garage sale, somebody's getting because that was sold at Toys R Us. That stuff can be fun to use. It works great in D&D. Sometimes train miniatures are close to the right scale, depending on the scale of minis you're using. And you might find certain hobby stores that deal with a more commercial market will sometimes offload stuff or mark things down. And that's one way if you want to build up kind of some rigid terrain in a box that you think might have a great use. Sometimes you can take something that looks like Small Town USA, add some sculpting clay and a coat of primer and some paint, and suddenly you're in a fantasy setting.
Yeah, train terrain is great for trees.
Yes.
You can grab lots of easy trees that kind of work at any scale from train hobby stores or Hobby Lobby or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So
go
ahead.
So that's where I would say check out maps first. Look at papercraft terrain. I mean, there's so much out there. There's probably a ton of YouTube videos as well that you could like find on how to build your own, terrain. I think the key is like you find the ones that like are that you can print on an 8.5 by 11 at your house, and then it tells you like where to fold and what to do, so that it's like looks like actual printed terrain instead of you like coloring on it with a crayon or something like that.
Yeah,
You know.
and a thick cardstock is not that hard to get a hold of, and you don't have to buy a whole
it's easy.
ream. You
Right.
can buy 100 sheets of a high weight cardstock will work in an inkjet printer or a laser printer just fine, and before you know it, you've got a little city happening.
Etsy's another good place. If you go to Etsy and look for like 2D terrain, there's lots of options of people that are kind of homemaking mats and different things for you.
And so, you go to Etsy. I'm sure there's stuff on eBay as well. I would say from there, like, you can graduate to pre-made terrain. So I'm talking like Games Workshop style terrain that you could buy, or like FFG's got terrain stuff, like from companies that you could buy. And again, Etsy's got some of this like 3D printed terrain that you can get. That's going to generally be a little bit more expensive, and I can tell you personally, after having bought a whole bunch of terrain from Games Workshop and Amazon and stuff like that, that it's not cheap, but it looks really, really good. Like, it looks really, really good because it is, plastic injected mold, and, you don't have the lines from 3D printing and stuff like that. Again, that's a little bit more expensive. Now, if you want to graduate from that, in my opinion, that's when you're getting your own 3D printer and you are printing your own terrain to make your stuff. And the reason why I think that it is graduated from just buying it from Games Workshop is because it's the time invested to actually 3D print your own stuff.
Well, I would say there's one in between, and that is that there are people who will 3D print as a service.
Oh, that's true.
So you can actually you could buy the STLs off of printablescenery.com, which makes amazing terrain, printable terrain, and you can. There are people on Etsy that will print for a price for you, which I found is still cheaper than buying from like retail, like GW.
Yeah,
but I think GW you pay a premium for GW and CMON and Fantasy Flight because you're getting a high quality sculpt that has a QA associated with it.
Right.
But I think that I think that you could pay someone to 3D print if you wanted as another intermediate if you were looking for the next step, but you didn't want to pay $200 some for a box or something. Might be an option.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye on what games are recently going out of print, and if it's a 3D game that also has terrain, you can get miniatures real cheap for role-playing games, and sometimes you can get, if it's a box set of a game that nobody likes anymore or didn't take off, or a Kickstarter that no longer has juice, you can stretch your dollar out and add high quality and low dollar at the same time. So you just have to be kind of always be sniffing out for you have to be sniffing out and looking for failure. You're like, oh, which game is no longer in print? Which game just recently went out of print?
Yeah.
I know this is a little morose to pick meat off the bones of dead games, but it happens to work really great if you go to a game store where they have like a bin where they've marked everything down, or if you're at a convention and folks are marking things down just to move it off their shelves. It can be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of options for you to go. I think the bigger questions isn't so much like how much it is, or even how long it can take you to get into setting this stuff up. The big question is having terrain going to slow you down, slow your game down? Do you have the space for the terrain both on your table and your shelves? And is the terrain gonna be worth it? Like, is the setup and the time to like get everything going and playing with it, is it gonna be a hindrance to your game, or like is the bang for the buck right? Does the equation work out?
Are you going to find that your terrain drives your story development because you got to use that piece that you bought?
Right. Is that a good thing? I don't know if that's a good thing.
I don't think it is. I think generally that's not a good thing. I think I look at the shelf and I think I really want to get that on the table, so let's find a way to get that on the table. Whereas I'm not focusing more on the story that allows the freedom of play of the characters to develop the world around them. But I think like any game, especially with role playing games, a savvy GM can find a way to work terrain in without breaking the story or without feeling like you're railroading. But if you are not careful, all things we get excited about, our excitement for the terrain may drive the terrain controlling the story a little bit. You just want to avoid that.
Yeah, it's very true. Like it's so easy to be like, I put in all of this money, and by gosh, we're gonna play that.
So we had I mean, non-terrain related, but the same kind of thing. We had a buddy who used to play Nurgle, and he painted this amazing like Nurgle monster. It's like a 3-story Nurgle monster thing.
Yeah,
it was beautiful. And I remember one point he told me, he's like, this isn't the best model to put into an army for the rules, but I can't not bring it because of so much effort I put into it.
Right.
And he didn't always bring it, but I'll tell you, I saw that thing a lot.
Yeah.
And it was so fun to play. But it's a good point that, you know, sometimes we can be driven too much by the tangible things versus kind of the creativity of our minds as we play these games. So just something to watch out for.
Definitely
agreed. Yeah, no, and it doesn't hurt if you've collected 2 or 3 things and you're like, well, this session could go maybe 3 ways, and I've got 3 different things I want to use. I'll probably only use one. That can be a great way to kind of, you know, split that baby in 3 ways. It could be cool.
Know your players too, because I mean, if your players show up one day and you got this awesome like swamp wood rickety like house thing in the middle, they might think, "All right, let's go explore that. It looks fun."
Right.
You know, just know your players.
Yeah, and some players will be like, "So this is what we have to do tonight."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
or they'll be like, "So the GM obviously wants us to do that, so we're not going to."
Not at all.
He's like, "You're not invited back, you jerk."
Yeah. That's the thing.
So I want to talk about a different facet of this really briefly. We talked about gaming terrain for RPGs. We did not talk about gaming terrain in board games, and which is, I think, an interesting idea because board games are generally fixed games, right? You generally know what you're getting. And so I bring this up because we have a mutual friend who did a whole bunch of 3D prints for the Settlers of Catan tiles. Okay, so like if it was grasslands, it looked like little grasslands. If it was like the clay ones, and they had like little bricks of clay on there, right? If it was like stone, they had like stone. Like, it looked like a stone quarry type of thing that you that was on the tile, and you could print them out, and you could paint them the colors that they were in the game, and play with that as the tiles instead of the flat 2D looking ones. So, what do you think about having gaming terrain in board games?
Look, I think it gets back to something we said earlier, right? Board games have a much stricter rule set
Yes.
than role-playing games. Those rules can be accomplished with 3D terrain. They can be accomplished with 2D picture terrain. They can be accomplished with cards. They don't need the 3D terrain. I think what the 3D terrain adds to a board game is just a little bit more immersion, because you can achieve, as the hundreds of thousands of board games that have come before have shown, you can have a 2D board that has terrain in it that still allows you to obey the rules of the board game.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Cursed City box that I have, right? You've got the 2D map tiles that are all over the place. But I think it would be really cool if I could have some 3D printed doors that you could get through.
But I think that's the key, is it's cool. It
Yeah,
doesn't change
totally.
the game, right? It's all about the cool, the immersion, and Hero Quest was a great game, right? Hero Quest is like a Cursed City, like early, like a what's the game that Jim plays all the time that he loves?
Descent.
Yeah,
Yep.
Descent. Yeah, but it had little papercraft tables and papercraft treasure chests and closets and stuff like that. And it really set that game apart from a lot of other games, because you'd lay this thing on the table and you'd see stuff pop up out of the board. It didn't change the rules. You could still play the game without those things, as long as you had some sort of 2D representation. But it made the game way more cool,
Right.
to quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big. Anytime you can take a board game and take it from 2D to 3D, it's always fun for me. I'm a big fan. I never get
Totally.
sick of it. Like I took Star Wars Outer Rim, which is a smuggler's game, and I took all the little cardboard pieces that sit on little plastic stands, and I swapped them all out with Wizards of the Coast Star Wars minis. I had a pretty good collection, and I pretty much took care of it before I knew it. I wasn't replacing the 8 main characters. I was replacing all 50 of the NPCs too. There are the main NPCs that you can that you can find, and then there are other NPCs in the deck, and I'm like, well, I need a mini for that guy too. And before I knew it, I had this gigantic menagerie of minis.
Nice.
And it makes the game more interesting. It makes it more fun, and I like it. It's more clumsy. There's more steps. There's more things on the table, but I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Is it? Well, sorry, I was gonna say, is it really that much more clumsy though with a board game? Because I don't agree. Like I think in an RPG where like players are making decisions to go left or right or up or down or whatever like that can make it really clumsy because you have planned a certain way and they're not going that way, or you know I mean, like it takes time to kind of set it up because of fog of war. But again, with like a Catan or Doorways in Curse City or something like that, it really doesn't take that much more time to put a 3D printed door versus a cardboard
door.
A cardboard door, right?
It's
the
when
time.
What I meant is it's when you're adding to it, right?
Sure.
Like for instance, in the Outer Rim, I'm going to take Outer Rim as the example. You would just be moving your cardboard piece vertically on a little plastic base all around the galaxy.
Yeah.
Well, I've thrown in all these minis. You're moving your whole team together from planet to planet. It's
Oh,
like
yeah, I gotcha.
Han and Chewie and a droid and Maz Kanata. And we're all going together, So sometimes
Right.
if you're introducing more components than the game is designed to have, just know you're just doing that and just embrace it if that's what you want.
Yeah, totally. The cons of I think 3D board game terrain are, one, you've got a storage issue again, right? Because a lot of these games are like 2-inch boxes, 3-inch boxes maybe, and they're packed, and so like how are you going to fit in that 3D terrain into that box? You may have to get a new storage system for it. So that's the problem, one. Two, it can be expensive, obviously, to kit out your thing with
raise the price of the game. Yep.
Yep, gonna raise the price of the game.
And you
so
have to love the game enough to know that you're going to play it a bunch of times with your friends who will also love the game.
Right.
Which is not the same thing as doing a whole bunch of stuff for a game and then pitching it to your friends and they're like, can we do something else?
Right. Yep. And the third one is that it takes time, right? Like it's going to be a time eater. Like, I mean, if you're printing it out and then painting it, right, because you just don't want gray plastic doors, like you're actually going to try to paint them like stone doors or whatever you're going to do. It's going to take time. But is the payoff worth it? And I think for, like, depending on the game, I think the payoff is much greater in a board game than it is an RPG game, in my opinion.
Yeah, we all played a game of Scythe where the guy went through and took every component and every miniature and meticulously painted everything, every bucket of ore or set of wood had been meticulously painted, and it improved the game. It was more fun is the wrong word. I think more interesting, it was more engaging. I think we've used the word immersive a lot, and that works, but I think engaging is probably a slightly better term for board games than an RPG.
I think there's a cute factor too.
Cute factor?
It's like cute factor.
It's so
yeah, because
cute.
it's little. It's little. It's cute.
It's
Yeah.
little.
I have my wife playing Scythe.
Oh yeah.
Oh, look at that little log. Look at that little mech.
Look at the
So
little mech.
cute.
He's so
Look at
adorable.
that little mech trying to take over that territory. It's so
Yeah.
cute.
He's just trying to chop down some trees to bring the wood home, keep the family warm.
We didn't even talk about buying neoprene boards for board games, and that's its whole magical thing. It's like,
Yeah.
cardboard isn't good enough for me. I need a 3x3 neoprene mat, and I've
Well, and I was
invested
going to
in one or
suggest
two of
that
those.
I was gonna suggest it for like if you've got a part of your campaign that like they're doing some overland travel or something like that. If you've got like for example, Jason and I have a Warhammer Age of Sigmar map that's like grasslands, right? And like if you know that you're gonna spend a significant amount of time or like out of the city or whatever, just throw that mat down on the table, the whole thing, right? It's gonna cover the whole table, but at least kind of gives you a little like if you're gonna throw minis up there, at least like they're out in the grasslands or something like that. So table mats can provide some kind of quote unquote terrain as well too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. For
So-
much of the same, they provide a lot of the same stuff we talked about before.
Exactly. Well, I think we have talked this one to death. For our listeners, I hope you guys think about getting terrain. I love terrain. I mean, I'm looking at a whole crap ton of it right now on my desk that's staring at me that needs to be painted. I got a whole bunch of dry brushing to do. But I love it. I love having the terrain, and especially obviously we didn't talk about the war game skirmish game stuff because that wasn't the topic. But having that war game terrain stuff and being able to use it in RPGs, like it's great because I do have it on hand and I have a storage plan for it. But it's gonna be really good. So
I have one quick tip.
yeah,
Quick tip. A friend, one of those sets of terrain I was telling you about, it was white PLA, right? And they were girders and stuff like that, and they made a three-dimensional platforms and bridges and ladders and stuff. I took all that PLA, I took it outside, I bought $6 worth of gunmetal gray spray paint and did one coat of spray paint, and now it is way more awesome. So sometimes you can take something that's very simple and do one quick treatment to it just to give it that little bit of spice, and you'll be surprised how much that adds to the flavor of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Us painted stuff tends to play better than unpainted stuff. So
Every
it's
time.
good times.
Every time.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you everybody for listening to us tonight. We kind of didn't hit our normal time. I'm a little surprised.
What do you
We're
mean?
not terribly far off,
We
though.
didn't hit an hour and a half?
1 hour 26 minutes seems to be my sweet spot, right, Jason?
I think it's 133.
133 is my sweet spot.
Quick, somebody
Yeah.
cut him off while we're still young.
Exactly.
This
So
is good.
well, thank you everybody for listening tonight. If you've got some tips or tricks on what to do with gaming terrain, feel free to leave us a comment on our Facebook page and or Twitter. We love responses. We love interacting with the folks who we're associated with. So leave us a response. Let us know what you think. And if you got some tips on good gaming terrain and where to get them, also let us know because we'd love to put that out to our community as well. So in the meantime, keep the dice rolling, and y'all have a good night.
See ya.
Take care. Good night.